Welcome, fiends of the pod. I'm your host, film critic, and comedian Nate Wyckoff. And I want to tell you that you can go to cultandclassicfilms.com to buy exclusive, ultra low budget films directly from us. And I want to say this money goes directly to the filmmakers with our films. We do not sell movies without paying the filmmakers. So you're doing good and you're getting an awesome product that is guaranteed to be so weird that all of your other friends will not believe it exists. But it does, and you can get it. You can also subscribe and get them delivered to your door every month at a big discount. Make sure you like and subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and for every like, subscription, and sale we make, we're going to bring back exploitation. I promise. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to a brand new year. And we are back to our normal episodes here at Cult and Classic Podcast, where we talk about two films thematically linked, one of which is a cult film and one of which is a mainstream film. We're starting the new year off with a special of specials. That's right. We are doing after school specials here on Cult and Classic Podcast. And we have a two-parter as usual. So this episode, we're going to be focusing on 1990s animated cartoon all-stars to the rescue, which there's a lot to talk about. And then for part two, we will be discussing the ABC after-school special called The Day My Kid Went Punk from 1980, which is live action and has Bernie Koppel from Get Smart in it. So we'll talk about that one next week. And right now, let's dive into Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue. Of course, my name is Nathan Wyckoff. I am a comedian and film critic, and I have with me here Greg. How are you doing, Greg?
Doing great. Riding the H train, of course, and I'll be doing an 8-ball at the break.
That's right. This is a lot to talk about this film. And briefly joining us today, we also have Tad Mastroianni. How are you doing, Tad?
Smoke crack, get your job back.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true, but it certainly it rhymes. Yeah. All right. Well, Greg Johnson, I just want to ask because Tad, I think you mentioned that you had seen this before, correct?
Yes, I actually saw this when I was a kid, when it was released, and it was traumatizing.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait to revisit it.
I think a lot of people understood that, but Greg, I imagine you didn't see this when it came out. You're probably just a little too young.
A little, just barely, because let's see, 1990. It came out the year I was born. But I have seen it.
Okay.
And it did not disappoint on a second viewing. So
yeah. So how do we have this film? What is this film? So Cartoon All Stars to the Rescue was this like group effort between like the Motion Picture Association, I believe, and a whole bunch of entities, channels across properties, Disney, Warner Brothers, Mirage, who at the time created and owned Ninja Turtles, all sorts of United Artists Group who has Garfield, the cat, all of these things got together and said, hey, let's do an anti-drug PSA after school special. So they made a 32-minute animated special that has a ton of characters from many shows at the time, 1990, and put them together into this anti-drug PSA. The interesting thing is here, there's a lot of interesting things, but the plot is sort of narratively, this movie makes no sense. It's a 32-minute cameo train where the overall story is that there's an older brother, Michael, and his younger sister who looks up to him, notices that he's stolen her piggy bank money, and it's, of course, he's buying drugs and he's smoking marijuana. And this is during the time when marijuana was considered and really pushed to be a gateway drug. So the problem isn't so much the marijuana in the animation, at least they kind of got that part right. It's the fact that, then it's on to crack and, that's, or crystal, if you're back in 1990. And that, of course, leads the problem to addiction and all these other things. There's some good points and there's some wild insanity going on here. Like I said, it's a cameo train. So it doesn't, there's a lot of scenes that don't need to be there and could be played in any order. Mainly, the kid's out of control. His breaking point is when he accidentally pushes his younger sister against a wall, and then he's like, "No drugs." And there's an animated character that personifies the desire to do drugs, that is in the credits, called Smoke, who is voiced by none other than our pod favorite George C. Scott. From Exorcist 3 and Hardcore, Turn It Off. It's just, he's a delight. It's a delight. This was his first voice acting gig, I believe. So let's just run down, before we get into the what we think about this movie, all the cameos. There are the Smurfs, Papa Smurf, and I forget how many. There's like 3 other Smurfs that give vocal moments. And then there's no Smurfette. She's on the poster, but she's not in it. We have Garfield, of course, who is voiced by Lorenzo Music, who is sadly passed, but is one of the greatest animated voice actors of all time. He is Garfield. And then we have Kermit, Gonzo, and Miss Piggy from the Muppet Babies, which is one of the most underrated cartoon series in existence, in my opinion. And of course, it hasn't been officially released because they can't get the rights to all of the music and guest stars and clips from Star Wars that show had, but you can find it online if you're savvy. It also has the animated Alf, the alien Alf from the animated cartoon, not the live action cartoon, but he's voiced by the same person. They do reference him eating cats, of course. We have Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, voiced by Jim Cummings, I believe, or is it? I'll have to look, but it's not.
Yeah, it's Jim Cummings.
Okay, it's not his. This is, I believe, the first time that they're not voiced by Mel Blanc. So that's interesting, but he does a good job, of course, and we're familiar with him now in that role. We have Alvin and the Chipmunks from the 90s cartoon, which is my favorite Alvin era. And we have, is that everybody? Well, we have Tigger and Winnie the Pooh. Tigger has like one line, which makes sense because Jim Cummings is there. But we have Winnie the Pooh, and I think, and we have Huey, Dewey, and Louie from the original DuckTales cartoon, which was, of course, another fantastic cartoon series. So, I mean, and we have Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles, which
did we hit a Slimer from Ghostbusters?
Slimer from Ghostbusters. That's right. We have Slime, credited to Dan Aykroyd in these credits because, of course, he created the character along with several other people. But yeah, so we have that as well. And one thing I absolutely love is when a lot of the characters come on, we have their theme music from their show done in like this low tempo like underscoring, so we get a little bit of the Ghostbusters, a little bit of the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh theme song, all that stuff. So it's a delight. How do they enter this animated world? Unclear. Some of them come out of comic books, some of them are like toys that come to life. I fully believe that Pixar straight up ripped the idea of Toy Story right out of this, because we have the Garfield lamp coming to life. We have the Alf coming out of the picture, which, by the way, why does this little girl have a framed photo of the animated Alf on her nightstand? Like, what? That she's a furry. That's all I'm gonna say. She definitely grew up to be a furry. There's no other explanation.
That escalated quickly.
It's true. So before I get into the details of these scenes, Tad, I know you have a short time with us today, so I want to get to you. Tad, what is your experience and your vision of cartoon all-stars to the rescue?
This revisiting this after, when was this released? 1990.
Yep.
I was only 6 years old when this came out, and I was very excited to revisit it because I have a distinct traumatic memory of this special when it came out. I blocked out some of it, but I wanted to look at it through the eyes of an adult and discover what a surprise that it feels like it's being marketed more towards adults than the kids, because some of the themes are pretty heavy, especially for the generation that grew up, that were what was the intended audience.
Yeah.
And of course, it's throw every catchphrase possible at these kids to get them engaged.
Alf makes references to like 70s TV shows.
Right.
Like it's way out there. Like it just doesn't even, it's like you might as well reference Colonel Klink. Like no kid is going to be getting these references.
But yeah, I was happy to look through, more mature eyes as to what was so scary about this. And in reality, it's just that they just how effective they turned the kid, I don't know his name,
Michael.
into a ghoul. Like he
Yeah.
looks freakish when they show him his future. Like, this is what you're gonna look like if you keep doing the drugs. I'm like, that's yeah.
I mean,
if you're
heroin,
doing
I
meth,
guess, yeah, if or meth, and it it's so, and of course, I want to mention too that Michael is voiced by Jason Marston, who is another. I'm a fan, another fan of the pod here, or pod fan rather. Of course, voicing Max for a Goofy movie, as well as many other characters in animated too. So there's tons of voices in this. You cannot not hear people that you recognize vocally from other cartoons and things in this movie. And Frank Welker, of course, is in there as Slimer and Baby Kermit. There's Danny Goldman's in there, Brainy Smurf. I don't I don't know. And actually, sorry, Jeff Bergman, I think, is actually Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and Jim Cummings, of course, is coming back as Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. But the scary part, there's one scene that goes kind of long, and it's sort of the climax of the movie, which is when Michael is shown who's running his brain, who's in control, and he's like, it's me, of course. And they're like, the man, and they're like, no, it's Smoke, George C. Scott. And I mean, after watching Hardcore like the umpteenth time, George C. Scott's running my brain too, but in a little different scenario. And when he sees Smoke, then he goes into this weird, like, he falls into a nightmare circus, right, or a nightmare theme park, and like he's falling through, there's like buzz saws, and he's haggard, and he sees himself on like this is your future. And this is the wildest scene. He's this zombie character, right? Like, it's dead. He looks like Shaggy after 3 weeks of being dead, right? Like, he's decomposed a little looking, and he's laying on a stone altar in the center of this
like
giant black abyss flame colored ring of stone. It is the most like primal occult setup. It's, the imagery is heavy, and it's weird because it doesn't fit with what they're
Nate,
talking about.
How many drugs were involved with the creation of this PSA?
That's exactly what, because here's the thing too, right? Like, I appreciate that they mention, joints and marijuana, and that's the drug we see him doing several times. And we know in this day and age that the scare tactics involved with marijuana, whether you do marijuana or not, we know that the side effects are limited. There isn't really a physical addiction to marijuana. The idea of a gateway drug is probably just as societally caused by people doing drugs. Well, if you're doing that, you might as well do this more than anything else. We also know there's a lot of racial overtones with the quote unquote war on drugs, beginning with marijuana. And then we also know things like crystal meth, heroin, whatever you want, crack, dope, whatever, are whatever your lingo is at this point. We know that those are addictive, and they're highly dangerous substances, and they can be, and then we get all sorts of other things, K and whatever. Point being, I don't know why I had to bring ketamine into this. Point being, we know that there are dangerous drugs. We know that marijuana is not really that dangerous. In fact, here in California, it is of course legalized, and in New Hampshire, it is still heavily controlled, but technically legalized for certain uses. And then I think in Washington, I think it's legalized now, correct? Or is, I don't know. Great, yeah. So anyway, we know it's not really that big a deal. And I feel like, especially when you have things like the Ninja Turtles and in the comics drank beer and did all the things that teenagers do, the writers and animators were kind of aware that marijuana is sort of a ridiculous thing to harp on. So they do seem to escalate fairly quickly. They show us the crystal very early, and then they don't really talk about marijuana specifically throughout this. And it's kind of wise, because it would be even more ridiculous, right? I do really like, though, the main song where all of the characters chime in, even though I couldn't understand some of them because they are hardcore cartoon voices. The idea that the Just Say No song, it's just say no, or if you want to be like, if you don't want to be like kind of aggressive or mean about it, just say, no, I have to go home. No, I've got practice. Nah, no thanks. Like all these other ways, basically any way to just get out of the conversation. You don't have to be like really aggressive or a jerk, or tell the person like, you're being a bad kid, right?
I'm not a chicken, you're a turkey.
You're right. They're just like, just do whatever you do.
Just lie. Just
Right,
lie,
exactly.
kids.
Exactly.
Go out and lie. I mean, anytime someone says something to you that you're not into and you don't have a good reason to say no, or you can't say no, just lie. Just
And you know what?
lie.
I am 100% in favor of that. That is the one skill that adults shaft kids on, right? Like there's no reason why the good kids in our society should be screwed when they get older and they don't have an ability to tell a dishonest truth. And the people with bad childhoods absolutely can and run circles around them in the adult world. So I really appreciated that. I'm gonna say the worst cameo in this though, which breaks my heart, is Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles. He just shows up and he's kind of like, why are you being an idiot, bro? And I know that's not exactly what he says. That would be the Michael Bay version later. I don't. It was just shoved into the point where everybody else kind of comes in and out, and uh, I mean, they worked a lot of characters in, like I said, coming out of the comic book, or that the lamp is Garfield, Pooh is the stuffed animal. Then, but there's some that just either they show up or they're bonkers. Like Alvin and the Chipmunks have a TV and Lazy Boy inside an album jacket in, and it's not even an Alvin and the Chipmunks album jacket, but it's in the little girl's room. It looks almost like a Jefferson Starship album or something. Like I don't understand like where they were coming from. Are they actually like chipmunks that have like lived in, or like, just it's no explanation makes sense at all. It really doesn't make sense. Also, they imply when Bugs Bunny, first off, Bugs Bunny apparently works for Capsule Corp from Dragon Ball Z, because he pulls out of his pocket a little device with a button and presses it, and it expands into this big circular time machine, which Michael understands immediately is, whoa, a time machine, as though we all are aware what a time machine looks like. I mean, they might have well licensed the TARDIS and had it in here. But
I mean, Michael's clearly seen some of the concept art for the Time Machine by H.G. Wells. He's seen the cover, so
that's right. The 36-year-old stoner that's selling the kids the drugs has the old copy on his dash from when he went to community college, and we have like. Yeah, so the time machine, he goes back in time to when the past is black and white, which Bugs Bunny says it's the past, so it's in black and white. Get it? He actually says get it, and I'm like, which is hilarious.
well, to be fair, Michael is high, so he has to check. Do you get it?
He is, and then and then he like apparently like he started doing drugs like when he was, because he's like, oh, when I was a kid, and you're like, you're still a kid. Were you doing drugs when you were like 5 years old? Like, is this, he speaks as though it's a long time ago. But I'm like, I assumed it was like a month ago, because they're like, he's acting different. And you're just like, but he, wait, since when? Maybe the drugs aren't the problem. Like, what has happened recently? It just doesn't, the chronology of this does not make sense.
He smoked a joint and it made him feel like a big man.
Yeah, it's like I said, I don't think this is as wildly off the wall as like Reefer Madness was. Like, he doesn't smoke a joint and then kill a group of people and like not remember it, or like can't control himself, or has wild sex. Like none of that really happens. Like he needs money to feed this addiction apparently, and so he steals his kid sister's money, and then when she confronts him about why he's acting strange, or actually she's gonna do some drugs because Smoke is working on her, because she's like, oh well, we'll be friends again if I do them too. That's when he freaks out and he's like, no, don't do that, I'm an idiot. If the worst thing that as a sibling you do is grab your younger sibling's arm a little hard and push them backwards and they happen to gently bump into a wall, like you're probably on Leave It to Beaver. I feel like there's worse. I'm an only child, so I don't know these things.
I've you when you leave an imprint of your brother in a wall,
Right.
that's normal. That's the normal amount of violence, and typically between brothers. This
Yeah,
was like, that's adorable. Oh, he gently nudged her.
I was gonna say, having a younger sister, I mean, I pushed her stone cold sober as a kid, so it just shit happens.
Yeah, so this episode is officially called Evidence B. Yeah, no. So but seriously, like it's just it's a little hokey pokey, but it's cute, and it's cute that all of the characters in there. And I love Garfield is right on as character. Like he's sarcastic. He literally is like, you know, you expect him at any point in time to go, look, kid, I don't care. Do you have any lasagna? I really would like a nap. Everything can be solved with a nap. All vices should be calorie related and sleep related. It's pretty great. So the story, but there's lots of stories behind this show. So this was released on VHS. A lot of them, I believe, went to like schools and things that could show it. I think it was also available for purchase. I'm not sure, but there's apparently in somewhere in one of the scenes in the background or something, there is a Playboy magazine that has like a kinky drawing of a woman on it, and it was removed later. So our copy that came from the VHS does not appear to have that, but it is known for that. And it was simulcast when it originally aired on pretty much all the major networks: NBC, CBS, ABC, and there, according to Mark Evanier, he wrote all of the Garfield and Friends show. He's an amazing writer. He's also an amazing comic writer. He wrote for many comic books. Gru with Sergio Aragonés, like really great writer, excellent stuff. He apparently said that Jim Henson Productions allowed Garfield to be in this only if they showed it at the specific time, so it was not broadcast thereafter. I've seen some other notifications that seem to be it was shown again. I think Cartoon Network showed at one point, so I don't know what sort of exceptions were later offered, if any, but it is not widely available, for purchase, and it is really never been shown since its airing, at least not widely. And you can, of course, though, find it online in many locations, because it's crazy. We don't usually get crossovers like this. In fact, we never get crossovers to this extent. Like Roger Rabbit Who Framed Roger Rabbit would probably be the biggest, and then Space Jam 2 would probably be the next biggest. New Legacy, and really, it's wild. It's like a total time capsule moment. I want to mention before, because this is going to be a quick episode, it's only a 32-minute short, and like I said, there's not a lot of narrative depth here. I want to point out a couple of ultra crazy scenes, like when the Muppet Babies lead Michael through sort of an inner space, fantastic voyage on his brain. They don't really say it, and they might in some of the song, but again, it's hard to understand, especially Miss Piggy. Her voice is really high in that show, so when she sings, it's very difficult to hear. But they go through like the synapses of his brain that are firing all wild as he's doing drugs, and it's just sort of like, as you said, Tad, it feels like a hallucinogenic trip, and I don't really know what the goal was, because it's like, if Smoke is there in his George C. Scott voice saying like, isn't this great? Like, this is fun. Don't you want to have fun? Don't you want to have friends? And the Muppet Babies are like, it's crazy, right? And you're just like, I don't know. What am I supposed to get from this? I mean, Michael seems scared, but roller coasters do seem like a pretty fun time. They never really explain what the hell is going on. And it feels very psychedelic.
They tried their best to explain to younger kids about what it's like to have, like a tolerance reaction, but they use a roller coaster essentially as an analog, and it's like, yeah, but kids fucking love roller coasters, so I don't know if that was the best way to convey that information.
And the whole sort of arc of that song actually does have the most like accurate information about like addiction, probably, because it says, yes, you have a high, but it's this high that afterwards there can be a low. They say there is an equal low. That may not be true, but there's a low, and your tolerance can go up, so you'll need more and more just to be normal, and you won't even be able to attain that high, yet the lows will still be low. And that's true of any medication, right? Or many medications. Tolerance builds, and it's certainly true of things like heroin, etc. So that makes sense, but doing it in a song, in an action set piece, was really wild and too difficult to follow, at least from my adult ears. I don't know, maybe I needed to like have 3 bowls of Captain Crunch and then sit there with my bleeding mouth, and maybe I would be able to follow it a little better. I feel like if they just come straight out and had more direct things to say these messages to kids, it would have been more effective. But again, as you mentioned, Tad, fear was a much easier motivator in these things, and they figured that was the way to do it, especially since in that final climactic like nightmare hellscape circus type environment, there's very few guest stars, and the guest stars that do wander through don't help him really. At one point they throw him a raft, but usually he's just like waving to them and they're like, see ya. And that's when it just totally goes off the rails. Last thing I want to mention about this, well, let's go to Greg. Greg, I didn't really ask you directly, what was your take on this? As you said, you've seen it before, but watching it for the second time, not disappointing. What's your vibe?
I mean, I think you hit on the head. It's a time capsule. It's something else. It's kind of hard to put into words. I think what we haven't touched on though is that our version has the intro from George H.W. Bush,
right.
and First Lady Barbara Bush,
and their dog.
And the dog Millie.
Yeah.
I think. Which, that's really where you have to start suspending your disbelief that the Bushes know half of these characters. And I think they call out several by name that they're like, oh, like, your favorites, like Michelangelo. And I'm like, you've never seen Ninja Turtle.
And
there's no
and
fucking way.
Boozy and Drowsy. Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of batshit that this got made. Like you said, watching it, I forgot how many characters are in it. And we talk now about like the craziness of juggling like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and whatever, but this must have been something in its day, the legal paperwork.
I mean, like Wreck-It Ralph, they had so many issues working with Sega and Nintendo just to get Bowser and Eggman or Dr. Robotnik in there, and like the back and forth. And so this must have been insane. Also, I will say I found the animation fine, very on par with 1990s, except I thought that Michelangelo from the Turtles was a little off kilter sometimes. And this was produced in about 6 weeks, I think, from Wang Productions, who did a lot of these 90s shows. And I will say that they apparently did it. That's about half the time they would normally have to do a production like this. So for that, they did a good job. It fits in line with everything else that you'd see on TV at the time. I actually thought that the George Bush Sr. and Barbara Millie intro was kind of perfect because George Bush Sr. has always had a cartoon voice. It's not a real voice. I don't like he's
sounds
the only
like his
person,
character on The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly. He's the only person with the people that mimic him sort of do a better George Bush than George Bush. Like you just Barbara, let's go and watch this, right? Yes, we'll have it, and then talk to your kids about it afterward. And then there's a credit song that has like all of these things about the credit song is depressing. Did you watch to the end? Because it's this whole like Greg's nodding. It's like basically don't do drugs. Remember what we tell you. You'll grow up. Maybe you'll even forget about us, but keep in the back of your head what we're telling you, even if you have to say goodbye. I was like, this isn't Inside Out. Like, Pixar's not here. Like, leave me alone. Don't tell me that. And by the way, I am 37 years old and I know every single one of you. So don't you fucking tell me that I'm gonna forget you, Winnie the Pooh. That's bonkers.
Well, look, I wanna call out Winnie the Pooh specifically. Everyone else in this, they were just along for the ride, sitting under drugs, sure enough. But Winnie the Pooh was a fucking narc.
Totally.
And I cannot forgive that.
I love because he's talking to the little sister. Forgive me for saying so, but don't you think that you should say something to your parents? Like, it's not me, of course, I'm not you, and I'm just like, I just, totally like Rabbit, I expected to pop out and be like, Pooh, it's none of your business. Go back inside.
I mean, Winnie the Pooh literally has stitches already. It's right there.
He's also the only guest star who gets sort of accosted. Smoke hucks him across the room into a cupboard and slams it, and it slams shut.
Which rightfully done. So
before I forget, because Greg totally pointed out something I forgot. The mixed message from the whole beer incident where like the dad notices that a couple beers are missing,
and the mom's
just like, oh, you probably drank too many.
You probably drank them when you were watching football.
And it's like
drunk.
So I like how the whole message of this is to like just not do alcohol and drugs, but it's okay if dad does it.
Sure. And when dad's working in the garage, and by the way, dad is like his body is banging. That is weird. Everyone has like the tightest, like they must have seen into the future and been like skinny jeans that we're on it. But he's in the garage like pulling at a lawnmower. I don't know, some dude stuff, dad stuff, right? And the daughter comes in and is like, after Winnie the Pooh kind of gives her the nudge, and she's like, something, I think Michael's been acting weird. And his response is, he's a teenager, everything, he's supposed to be weird. You're like, hey, I think Michael needs help, dad. I think everybody needs help, honey. I'm gonna pull start this lawnmower and inhale some fumes for 20 minutes.
Man,
Like,
he's 2 steps away from boys will be boys, like coming out of his mouth.
Yes. And I totally I totally like saw that moment. I also want to mention too, I'm curious if anybody knows why, write into coltonclassicpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at Colton Classic Podcast. But in the credits, it of course has a list of like thanks to all of the property owners for each of the characters. Marvel is listed in there, and I don't know what property they owned at that time. I even went through the records and tried to find out. I don't know if for some legal reason they were required, like they had licensing rights in print or animation to some character that was in there. It could be something like that, but it's unclear why they were thanked in there, because in this copy, there is no Marvel owned property.
When did Warner Brothers acquire or merge up with Looney Tunes? However the hell that went down.
Warner Brothers, that was long before this.
Okay, I was like, that's the only thing that I'm thinking, like maybe there was some like Captain America and Bugs Bunny take on the Red Skull or something stupid.
And like it could be that Alvin and the Chip, several of these characters had Marvel. I think Alf actually had a Marvel, like the comic based on the animated series. So it could be that they had some sort of licensing rights to the animated form as well. So that's what I'm thinking, but it also wouldn't shock me if there were other cameos that got cut or dropped and they weren't pulled from the script, the credits elements. So it's interesting. This is an interesting one. Another interesting thing is the cover for it. The poster for it essentially was illustrated by Barry Jackson, who follow Barry Jackson on Instagram. I can't remember his exact handle, but he's an incredible animation worker and illustrator. He did a lot of the design and backgrounds for like Cool World. He has a children's book out, at least one, and a sketchbook painting collection. Really incredible illustrator. Just has worked on innumerable things, and I thought that was really cool to see that, because when you're looking at the poster, it's a great poster with like airbrush, characters from all these franchises. And at the same time, they're perfectly in the style of their original medias. So it doesn't, you wouldn't be able to tell like, oh, I know Barry Jackson's work inside out. That's him. He just matched their styles. But let's move right along to the recommendations so we can wrap this up. So I know, Tad, you've got to go. So why don't you tell us, who would you recommend Cartoon All-Stars to the rescue to, and why?
I think we need to traumatize an entirely new generation of kids. This is the great gateway drug to traumatizing media that starts from here and goes on to other classics, such as showing your child Alien, showing your child Terminator 1 and 2, showing your child Spaceballs. Because
for me, it was always RoboCop. RoboCop at 6 years old changed my world.
Traumatizing for adults. All right, that movie is traumatizing in general.
Would you say that this is the treat you give your kids after you show them the Star Wars Holiday Special?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, just real quick, because we touched on if you actually replace drugs with alcohol in this, and if you made the whole short about alcohol, everything actually makes sense. The addiction, the withdrawal, the aggression, the stealing money, the availability of it to kids, it actually totally makes sense, which is always a crazy thing because alcohol is completely legal. Of course, yes, you're supposed to be a certain age in the United States to consume it, but it is a completely legal drug that just about any child in America has some form of access to. And the idea that that's not the focus, yet we're focusing on things like drugs, is wild to me. All right, Greg, it's on to you. Who would you recommend Cartoon All-Stars to the rescue to, and why?
I don't think I would recommend it. Ultimately, it's kind of a hard one for me, just because I I think you really do have to see it to believe it. But I think a quick someone telling you about it is almost funny and like more funny. It's good enough to be like, wow, like I can't believe that happened. Um, in lieu of watching this, I think everyone should watch Saturday Morning All-Star Hits on Netflix, which I know I've recommended to you several times. It's basically a mini series that's a bunch of like the pitches you're watching VHSs where someone recorded their favorite Saturday morning TV show lineup that actually has an episode that's a direct parody of the cartoon All Stars to the Rescue. So check that out again, Saturday Morning All Star Hits. The only other thing I feel like we forgot to touch on was this was sponsored. We mentioned it that it was financed by the Ronald McDonald Children's Charities.
Yeah,
and they have an intro and an outro ad for those charities.
and it's the same on both.
Yeah, that it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. It felt a little bit exploitive of, hey, we're gonna pick
Differently abled people.
We're gonna pick the most visibly differently abled kids that we can and kind of tug you in a way that's very 80s and 90s, using them almost as
Hey everyone,
I don't know,
thanks for listening to
donation
Cult and Classic
pieces instead of
Podcast. This
people.
podcast is important to me.
But,
What's more important
but
are the
yeah,
rights,
overall,
privileges, and freedom from violence
if you
of
cannot believe that
everyone
this
in
happened,
this country
watch it.
and in
Otherwise,
this
just
world.
watch.
And that means supporting Black Lives
Saturday
Matter.
Morning,
If you'd like to make a
All-Stars or
donation,
whatever it was
please
that
go
I
ahead and
just said
visit
on Netflix.
cultandclassicpodcast.com,
will capture
where we have a list of places you
good
can donate
parody and
and
give
help
you a
out.
sense of
And
what
please
this was
stay
like.
safe.
I would say that it's fair if you're interested. If you're a 90s kid, yeah, give it a watch. It's 32 minutes and you'll be able to say you did. And it moves so fast, even though it's borderline nonsensical in many places, that you're not going to be like, I can't believe I wasted my 30 minutes. Like, it'd be fine. But I also think just downloading the Barry Jackson cover art and printing that out on a nice ledger-sized piece of paper from Kinko's and putting that in your room is going to give you all the nostalgia you need, because more characters than are actually in the show are on it, and it's pretty great. I would recommend it to people who are interested in the 90s. If you are a 90s kid, then give it a go. It's short. You can watch it on YouTube or wherever you want. If you're going to try and track down a VHS copy, good luck. You're going to be out some cash, but not necessary. It is fascinating. It's interesting to see all these characters, but the history is really where it's at here rather than the actual content. Also, as a side note, check out go Google the Garfield Ninja Turtle crossover comic strip. It's far superior as far as content. It's actually pretty awesome, and it's painted nicely. It's a beautiful piece of work, and yeah, the Ronald McDonald Foundation, now the Ronald McDonald House, there's various branches, which does have a pretty good rating as far as charities go. Did sponsor this. You can still donate to them all the time, and they do a lot of great things for kids and people and family assistance. But it does feel exploitative, as you said, in a very 90s way, something we wouldn't see as much now, where it's showing differently abled people and playing like this love theme song and having them talk the theme song at the camera. It's just weird. It's
Definitely don't get it twisted. Ron McDonald, their charities do a lot of good stuff, but it feels very very Albert Schweitzer, where I'm like, I know that you don't have some of the best interests, but you're doing some good things, so I guess we'll call it a wash and I'll throw some money.
Right. Yeah. And it's but I did think it was weird that on the VHS they did put the ad for it first before the message from the Bush family, and then after again the exact same one. I'm like, wow, you're really hammering this home. You're just betting that if a family gets a hold of this tape, you're just going to hit rewind and repeat over and over, and your kid's going to have that ingrained in their head. But yeah, so that's it for this part one of After School Specials here at Cult and Classic Podcast. Sorry I've said us so much today, but this is really a head scratcher of a film, and it has caused me to sort of lose part of my brain logic circuits. They're just not quite right. It was wild, and it was being bashed over the head with so many co-stars is a little disconcerting, which I didn't really expect, having seen it before. But catch us next week for part 2 of After School Specials with The Day My Kid Went Punk, 1987. To play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Remember to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at Cult and Classic Podcast.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.